G'day guys, Will here, welcome back to the channel. So today's video was supposed to be a first drive in Project Cars 2, but what I found, I started filming it, I was, sort of getting through the video and I thought, this is actually turning out to be kind of boring because basically there was so much tweaking that I needed to do to get everything that you see in front of me now working properly. So triple monitor setup was pretty straightforward in this game, and I probably won't cover that in too much detail in this video. I'll just sort of skim over it. I might do a separate video on triple monitor setup if you guys want me to, so let me know in the comments below if that's something that you would like to see. But I spent most of my time here actually modifying the force feedback for the Club Sport wheelbase 2.5. The steering input was probably the one thing that I felt I was struggling with the most. It just felt basically like driving an R33 GTR. It felt like a boat. It was really sort of muted and dampened. It felt like the damper was cranked all the way up. And jumping out of iRacing into this, I just felt like I wasn't getting the level of feedback. I wasn't feeling the textures in the road. I wasn't feeling the turn-in. I wasn't feeling the car bite. And, I mean, generally speaking, Project Cars 2 does tend to be a little bit more floaty in terms of how the cars feel compared to iRacing. It's a little less direct. But I set out to really try and improve that. In terms of the motion platform, I didn't have to tweak too much to get that working. But yeah, the wheel itself, I really struggled to get that feeling right. So rather than doing a first drive and sort of going through the process of adjusting things, what I thought I'd do is I'd take you for a drive now I've got everything set up, and then go back and show you how I've got things configured. So this is probably more of a sort of setup type video than it is a first drive video, but nonetheless, hopefully you guys find it entertaining and useful. So let's jump into the game now quickly, and we'll go for a drive first. Alright, so while we get all of our gear on, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to be doing a LaFerrari around Mount Panorama. Now, there's a very good reason why I've chosen this particular car. Well, there's a few reasons why I've chosen this particular car on this particular track. Now, Mount Panorama happens to be about 4 hours drive from my house here, so it is actually a track that I've spent quite a lot of time driving around. Now, for you guys that might not be familiar, it is actually a public road during the times when it's not being used as a racetrack. So you can just drive, you can just go there and just drive around the track. Unfortunately, the speed limit is 60 kilometers an hour. Now, I will admit that probably about, well, it'd be 15 years ago now, I took one of my WRXs there, and we went there with a car club, and we had spotters all the way around the track. We all had CB radios, so we were keeping an eye out for the cops, and we may or may not have gotten a little bit naughty on the track. So police, if you're watching this, I apologise for my behaviour when I was 18 years old, but I'm a lot more sensible now. But these days you can't really get around with it. There's radar traps and stuff like that around the track as well. Now, the reason why I've chosen a LaFerrari is that it's a bit of a long story, and let me know in the comments if it's something you want to hear about, but I have actually driven a LaFerrari in real life in the past. Not at any great speed, but I actually used to work at a car museum that had a lot of supercars and things like that, and I was lucky enough to have driven a LaFerrari, so I'm a little bit familiar with how it handles. I know that it's a car that is incredibly powerful, and that the handling doesn't necessarily sort of match the power, so it can get really tail happy when you really plant it. It squirms around, the traction control kind of kicks in, and it's a really sort of exciting and exhilarating car to drive. So it should make for a pretty good demonstration of how the motion platform, the wheel, and the triple screens all kind of work together to provide a really immersive experience. So let's get the headphones on, and we'll hit the track. If you're interested to know a little bit more about that whole driving a LaFerrari and how I got to do that, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to talk about it a little bit more. It was definitely a very interesting time in my life. I got to drive a lot of very cool cars. F40, 959, what else did we drive? McLarens, heaps of stuff. It was very cool. But anyway, let me know if you want to learn more about that, but we're going to head out to the track now. I believe that the tyres will turn completely cold as soon as we actually hit the track, so we'll see about that. Yeah, they're cold. Okay, we'll try and bring the tyres up to temperature, and immediately you feel the car squirming underneath you as you weave down the circuit. Oh, over the bump. I really got the sense of lightness when I went over that bump there. Oh, yes. Love how the car just squirms underneath you. Now, I know that Project Cars isn't the most realistic game in the world. I mean, a lot of people would argue that it's sort of a pseudo-sim or it's a bit of an arcade game. But I think, you know, obviously it's not as realistic as iRacing is. But I feel like they've done a pretty good job of, you know, creating something that you can extract a lot out of if you really get into it. I'm sure that you could get really fast and competitive. Kind of like F1 2018, where, you know, on the upper limit, you can be really competitive, even though it isn't necessarily the most realistic game in the world. But, you know, it definitely doesn't offer that same level of realism that iRacing does. But they've really hit a good balance between, you know, something that you can be competitive at and, you know, get a lot out of in terms of, you know, a simulation, but also just jump in and drive and have a lot of fun straight away. I found with iRacing, cold tires. I found with iRacing, you know, it really does take a good number of hours to sort of start to get used to it, and you suck so much at it at the beginning, and it's almost like you want to give up, whereas this is something that you kind of just enjoy straight away. But anyway, let's try and get some temperature into these tyres, and we'll see if we can get a decent lap. You can see the car just braking away, and that's with traction control on as well. It just kind of spits you out. But I've definitely not got that boaty feeling through the steering anymore that I had with the previous settings. So we will take you through exactly what I did to modify the force feedback settings in a moment once we've done a few laps. Oh, cold tyres. Ah! We're going to go into the fence, aren't we? Nah. Oh, it's like it won't even pull up at all. Alright. Now we've got dirty tyres as well as cold tyres. It's just so different to drive this car compared to what I'm used to driving. I've been doing so much Formula 1 and so much with the, you know, the cars in iRacing that this, you know, you have to brake so early in this car compared to what you think. It's almost like you're braking 100 meters before you think you have to. Even then, like, I still missed the apex. Anyway. Starting to get some temperature now. It's amazing how you really do get that pit of your stomach kind of feeling as you hop over the bump. Why am I still understeering so much? Yeah, that feels so good. I know it's not the fastest way around corners, but feeling the car dance underneath you is so awesome. And it gives you that same kind of thing I was talking about with iRacing, and once I got Dirt Rally dialed in, it was kind of the same. Whereas you forget that you're sitting in a mechanical motion platform. You almost forget that it's there. It just almost like it becomes an extension of your body, which is, you know, it sounds funny, but it really is the case. You really do feel like you're at one with the car, and it just sort of all blends in together. And between the communication that you get through the steering wheel with all the force feedback and vibration, the ABS vibration through the pedals and everything as well, it all really does work together in unison so well once you get the settings dialed in. So I'll share those settings with you very soon, but I want to try and get a decent lap here, sort of get everything dialed together now the tyres are warmed up. Oh, you really do feel, when you go over those bumps, you really do feel the car getting light underneath you. It is incredible. Oh, not quite. Alright, we'll get it right this time. If you have any tips for me, let me know. As I said, I'm definitely a noob to this game. But we're still having a lot of fun, and that's what it's all about. Still braking too late there. I'm going to have to give drifting a go with this motion platform. I think that's going to be really cool. I've never, ever done any form of drifting before in real life or in sim, so definitely going to need to do some learning there before I broadcast anything, but I think the sense of realness that you would get with this motion platform with a drifting type game would be so cool. I need to give Rallycross a go in Dirt 2 as well. A couple of you guys suggested that in the comments, so I will definitely give that a try. Okay, now we're starting to get some bite in the front of the car. So it's like by the time the practice session's over, the tyres are only just warming up. Yeah, the front of the car's biting in now. I'm actually getting some turn in. Alright, one more lap and we'll call it quits and we'll go and have a look at some settings. You really do get that sense of speed. Oh, it actually makes you churn in your stomach when you go over the bump. Yay, we actually pulled up this time. I think I actually broke a little bit too much. Oh, I'm feeling it drift underneath me. Oh, that is so cool. Oh, I wish you guys could all be here to actually drive this thing. I really do. It is so good. If you ever do get the opportunity to try a motion platform, honestly, it's got to be the best money I've spent on this rig. I mean, it was expensive. There's no question about that. And I was, as I've said in the earlier video, I was given a very, very nice discount by Next Level Racing, which I greatly appreciate. But honestly, guys, I know they're expensive. I get that, but it really does add a level of realism that cannot be described. It is absolutely awesome, and the more I get used to it, the more I'm appreciating it. Oh! Yeah, now we got some turn in. This is better. Oh. Oh. It's almost like the car's too powerful for itself. It just lurches all over the place. It's an absolute animal. But that's what it's like in real life. Like, I mean, obviously I wasn't hammering it around the track or anything, but just you put your foot down and it just dances. It's a beautiful car to drive. Oops. Thought I was going to get one decent lap, but looks like it's not going to happen. You get that push understeer as well. If you're turning in and you start to accelerate, it just pushes through. We'll see if we can make it around for one more lap. Feel free to skip to the part where where I talk about the settings if you want to, but I'm going to try and get one more lap in if I can, because obviously I'm just going to cut across the grass here to try and get back to the start line as quickly as possible. Yeah, we should make it around for one more, I think. Yeah. Alright, let's see if we can string it all together for one lap. Come on. Gets me every time. That's better. Feels okay so far. I don't know if it's going to be actually a decent lap time for this car. Let me know in the comments, guys. I don't know what would be considered a good lap time for this car, but this feels okay. Obviously, I'm not setting any records, but I'm having fun. I'm not crashing, so that's an improvement. Alright, see if we can get the chase right this time. Oh, I feel it drifting. So good. Nice, we actually made it around a lap without crashing. 2:14.4. Is that half decent? I don't know. I think the V8 supercars do it in like 150 or something like that in real life. I don't know, something like that I think. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've actually watched a Bathurst race, unfortunately. Alright, so let's jump out now and actually take a look at these settings for you guys. Alright, get all this gear off quickly. Okay, so under options here, we go to our... We'll quickly show you triple screen just really quickly. So basically the way this works, you set up all your physical height, physical width, bezel width. So that's the thickness of the bezel. The distance to the screen is just the distance from your eyes to the center screen. And it's actually really cool the way they do this. So you've got the center screen, the right screen, and the left screen. So it's all pretty... Sorry, excuse me. It's all pretty self-explanatory. You got physical width for, you know, the side screens as well. Bezel left and right. So we've got 1 centimeter on each side of these bezels on this particular screen. Then you've got your vertical offset, which is whether the screens are up or down from the center one. So if there's an offset there. And then the angle from forward as well, which is the angle that they're actually tilted towards you. So all very self-explanatory, and it does a really good job of calculating everything for you from there. But let's have a look at our force feedback settings now, because this is where things get interesting. This is where I had to spend a lot of time to customize things here. So you can see here I've got flavor set to custom. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail in just a moment. But basically what we've done here is we're fine-tuning our settings based on our custom profiles. So got my gain set to 100, and a gain should always be set to 100, and then because that keeps the maximum amount of fidelity in the in the bumps and things like that. So the reason you want to have your gain set to 100% and adjust the strength with the volume is that when you turn down the gain, you're actually removing detail. So it's kind of like if you turn the volume down too low on your computer and then you crank up your headphones separately, you lose a lot of detail there. It's pretty much the same thing. So the gain is what actually transmits the detail through to the wheel, and then the volume is what you actually adjust to, I guess, fine-tune that from there. Tone and FX is kind of like a personal preference thing. And then menu spring strength, you really don't need to worry about that at all. That's not actually going to affect how the game feels at all. So what we need to talk about now is this custom profile setting here. So we'll jump out to the desktop again quickly now. So what we have here is a custom set of force feedback files by a guy called Jack Spade. Now I'll provide the link to download this in the description below. The version number may change between now and what you see when you're watching this video, but at the moment I'm running version 2.13. So it's a zip file, you download it, you unzip it, and you're presented with a folder here. And then you've got a couple of folders here, SOP diff and traditional. And you've got a little bit of an explanation here, which I'll quickly go through with you now. So basically this is sort of like a technical explanation of exactly what causes that kind of R33 Skyline feeling in the steering, handling like a boat. And the steps that he's basically gone through to try and alleviate that. So essentially what it's saying here is that the way that they've done the force feedback in this game gives you a permanent damping side effect, which he identified as the cause of that boat kind of feeling. So these SOP diff files, he's made a bunch of adjustments that that basically alleviate that problem. And I really honestly feel like he's done an absolutely amazing job. So massive props to Jack Spade. So what we want to do is we want to basically go into our SOP diff folder here. Now you can go into the traditional one as well and play around with those files. It all comes down to personal preference at the end of the day. But I'm actually using SOP diff standard mid compensation SOP diff file. That was the one that I found gave me what I felt was the most realistic input. So what we want to do is we want to open up our Project Cars folder. which is basically just in your Documents Project Cars 2 folder. And we want to delete our FFB custom settings file. So we just simply delete that. Now you don't need to worry about backing it up, because if you do decide you want to go back to stock, all you need to do is delete the file that's in there completely. When you start the game, it will create a new one for you from scratch with no errors or anything like that. So all we want to do is drag the one that we want to test across into our Project Cars 2 folder. And then we just need to rename it as well to get rid of the end part. So everything behind the settings we want to delete, and obviously leave the .text there as well. And we've got a little F there, a rogue F. So we close that. Then all we need to do is reboot the game. And I'm not going to reboot it now, obviously, but if we go inside the game and make sure we have custom selected here, have a drive, see how it feels, and then you can fine tune it from there. Now, we also do need to take a look quickly at our force feedback settings. So we'll zoom in on the wheel now, and I'll show you how I've got all that configured. So on the wheel itself, I've set up a separate profile here. You can see setting number 3, which is for Project Cars specifically. Now, you will need to fine tune this a little bit depending on the car that you're driving, and I will also mention that I have a separate video where I went through all of the Fanatic settings menu or the tuning menu in great detail, explain exactly what every single setting is and what it does. So I'll link that at the top of the screen as well as in the description for you, but we'll quickly run through this now. So sensitivity I have set to automatic. Project Cars does a perfectly good job of mapping the amount of input that you're putting in real life to the amount of steering input inside the game. So I haven't felt the need to adjust that at all. But if you did find that you wanted the steering to be a little bit more sensitive so that you turn less to turn more inside the game, you can crank this down to your personal preference. Cross to FF, which is force feedback, I have this set to 60. Obviously, you can crank this up if you want it to be a little bit more realistic, but I found that you start to get a little bit of clipping if you go above about 80, and it just starts to get a little bit kind of mechanical feeling. So 60 feels pretty good to me. SHO is the strength of the vibration motors inside the wheel itself, and I leave that usually set to around 80 for all games. But again, it's personal preference there. It really depends on what you like the feeling of. You just kind of want to have it set to a level where it feels like it's not taking attention away from all the other things that you're feeling inside the car. So it becomes, you know, like I said before, an extension of your body rather than, you know, feeling something that's sort of in your face. ABS settings, so I have that set to around 70. All that is the point at which the vibration motor in the pedal kicks in when you're braking. Again, you'll need to adjust this depending on the car that you're driving, but I find around sort of 70 to 80 tends to be a good setting for most cars. DRL is the drift setting. So I have this set to -3 for Project Cars. What that means is that you still have a little bit of weight in the wheel in the car, so it's not just free spinning. You can see if I crank that up to off, for example, it basically just free spins. And if I crank it up to +5, it actually accelerates on its own as I spin it. And that's what you use for drifting and stuff like that. But for Project Cars, for anything other than, you know, driving on dirt and, you know, rallycross and things like that, leave it at -3. That's my setting anyway. FOR I leave set at 60, and check out the other video if you want an explanation of exactly what FOR does. It's basically a modifier for the force feedback, but this video is going to be long if I go into too much detail on that now. So check out that other video if you want to understand more about that. SPR is the spring rate, so the return rate, so the amount of force that the wheel is sort of trying to force you back to center, and I have that set to off because I like the game to control that for me. DPR, so this is damper setting. I leave this completely off. I want the game again to control the amount of damper that I have in the wheel. Brake force I have set to off. So if you find that you're having to push on the pedal too hard to get maximum braking force, you can crank this up. And a lot of games I actually run this at around sort of like the 6 or 7 to sort of 15 mark. F1 I actually run it at 6. But for this game, I leave this set to off, and I find, again, it does a perfectly good job. FEI, so again, watch the other video if you want an explanation of exactly what this setting does, but I leave it set to 100 for this game. And that is it for wheel settings. Okay, so we're nearly at the end, guys, but the last thing that I want to quickly take you through is my settings for my Buttkicker and the motion platform itself. So as you can see, there has been a fair bit of fine tuning that's gone on here. Unlike Dirt Rally, where I didn't really touch anything at all, I have gone in and done quite a bit of tweaking here just to kind of give that feeling of unity between what the motion platform is doing and what the wheel's doing. I found that at the out-of-the-box settings, it was kind of a little bit like F1 2018. It threw you around a little bit too much, and it just didn't give you that kind of seat-of-your-pants feeling where you really kind of feel what's going on with the car. And it's important, again, to understand, I know I've mentioned it in the previous videos, but it's really important to understand that what this motion platform is trying to do is it's trying to simulate how your body moves within the seat of a car itself. It's not trying to simulate how the car moves around on the racetrack. And that has some advantages and disadvantages. So the advantage is that it's able to respond extremely quickly to small little movements. So little tiny bumps, ripples in the road. When you saw me sort of going over those crests and getting that kind of stomach pitting rocking motion going on, that's really what this is able to reproduce really, really accurately. Now, obviously, the trade-off is that you're not able to generate realistic kind of G-force feelings. So it's really not trying to do that. You do have a little bit of a G-force feeling when you turn in, and it kind of leans you to the side a little bit, but it's not giving you a realistic sort of sustained G-force like you would have, you know, in a $100,000 motion simulator. Now, I think it's important to understand that even the super expensive 6 DOF or degrees of freedom motion platforms that you see, they still have a limited range of side-to-side movement, which means that, you know, when you throw yourself into a corner, yes, you do feel that initial G-force as you turn in, but to sustain that feeling of G-force throughout a prolonged corner, you would actually need to be spinning around in circles continuously, because that's the only way you can get that sustained feeling of movement. Obviously, as it reaches the end of its scope of movement, you lose that feeling of G-force. So it's important to understand what this platform is actually trying to achieve and what it's not trying to achieve. It's really all about feeling those tiny little details in the road that make you feel more connected to the car and feel like the car is an extension of your body. And I think that's what's really surprised me about this motion platform, is it really does do an incredible job of producing that feeling. So quickly going through the settings here, overall intensity we left at 1, and we kind of fine-tuned things underneath that. So bump intensity we turned down to 63, and that kind of just gives you that realistic feeling of going over bumps without it feeling sort of mechanical and robotic. Body roll gain 85 I felt was a good level, and this will change depending on the car that you're driving. Obviously, cars that have a stiffer suspension setup, you're probably going to want to turn this down a little bit to give you a slightly more realistic body roll feel. Vertical G-force gain, so that's going over bumps, and that's kind of that feeling when you go over the crests of those hills. 69 here, I kind of felt good. Obviously, you'll tweak it to your preference, but anything more than that, I kind of felt it started to get a little bit too exaggerated. Longitudinal G-force gain, this is the feeling of, you know, lurching forward in the seat when you brake. Now, one of my subscribers actually suggested a mod to my platform, which I'm going to be doing in the next couple of weeks, to actually give you a feeling of the seatbelts tightening as well. I'm really looking forward to experimenting with that, but haven't gotten around to doing that just yet. But yeah, this basically makes you feel, you know, tilts the seat forward as you brake, so it gives you that feeling of kind of being compressed into the car. And as well, when you accelerate, it gives you that sense of G-force kind of throwing you back or pushing you back in the seat when you accelerate. Lateral G-force, this kind of ties in with body roll gain, but it gives you that feeling of kind of just, you know, moving sideways in the seat rather than rocking from side to side. Now, I tend to crank this down a little bit simply because this platform does work on an axis, you know, tilting and rolling, so it doesn't move from side to side. And I find that, you know, if I crank this up too high, it does start to feel a little bit too boaty as opposed to feeling like G-force. Again, personal preference. Now, weight transfer bias I've left at 0. This basically adjusts the bias between movement backwards when you accelerate and movement under braking. So you would have seen in the F1 2018 video, I had to crank this down because I was feeling like it was lurching me forward way too much under braking. But Project Cars, it feels pretty good with a even keel here. Now, quickly have a look at motion post-processing. I didn't have to touch anything here. I felt like this was all pretty good. And if you check out my F1 2018 video that I'll link above my head for you now, I did explain this in a little bit more detail there because I did have to make some adjustments. Tactile feedback. So this is our butt kicker. I didn't actually end up touching any of the settings here whatsoever. I was really happy with how all of this felt out of the box. But again, obviously personal preference here, you can adjust things. Other thing that I will mention is that I do always switch off the rev limiter on the motion platform. This setting kind of causes the seat to shake back and forth when you hit the rev limiter, and I just feel that, you know, it's not really necessary. You can feel what's going on with the wheel through the butt kicker as well. So again, personal preference, but I like to leave that turned off. So guys, that is a quick run through of Project Cars. Now, as I said, it may not be the most realistic sim in the world, but it's definitely a sim that you can jump in and have a lot of fun with out of the box. The graphics are great. It really does give you that sense of immersion. And when you get everything dialed in well with the force feedback and motion and the triple screens, it really is an incredibly fun game to play. And I'm looking forward to spending more time on this as well, getting good at it and really extracting the most out of it, driving a bunch of different cars as well to test them out. But for now, that's it for this video. Hopefully you guys have found it interesting, entertaining, and useful. If you have, hit the thumbs up button. If you haven't liked it for some reason, hit the thumbs down. But also let me know in the comments what it is that you haven't liked about the video so I can improve in the future. Just hitting the thumbs down button on its own without giving any feedback really isn't particularly helpful for me to improve the videos. But guys, I hope you've been enjoying these daily videos lately. I'm going to try and keep it up as long as I possibly can. So I will see you guys again tomorrow. Now tomorrow we're going to be looking at something completely different. We're actually going to be testing out X-Plane 11 with the triple screen setup as well as the motion platform. Now I haven't actually played around with this at all yet, so I have no idea what to expect. It is going to be a first experience sort of reaction video. Now I don't have flight control, so I'm going to be using a mixture of mouse, keyboard and PS4 controller. But I can land a plane. I've done it before, so we'll see how we go with it. But anyway, that is one to stick around for. But thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you guys again tomorrow. See ya.